Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Weekly Hope. I'm Kirsten Hagland. It's a joy to be with you every week, sometimes 2 times a week, as we have 2 broadcasts this week. But I'm very, very glad that you are joining us. And of course, my unofficial co-host is here as well, Elsa. If you haven't met Elsa, here she is. She welcomes you all too. We're really, really excited. We have a great show for you today. As you can see on the screen, we've got Eric Wood joining us today. And it's really, really a joy to have him back because last week we were having this really, really great conversation about his area of expertise, and we'll get to that in a moment. But we were having some audio issues. So he was generous enough with his time and energy to join us back this week so that we could hear in full all of his wisdom and insight, and of course, give you the opportunity to ask questions. So that's what we are all about here at Weekly Hope. We want to bring in the experts, give you an opportunity to hear from them, and of course, share your thoughts, share your story. So as we talk to Eric, be sure to say hello, let us know where you're signing in from and where you're joining us from, what your name is. And of course, if you have a question at any time, just plug it into the comments. I'll bring it up onto the screen and we will ask our expert. So without further ado, we want to welcome Eric Wood to the show. He is a PhD, LPC, and the clinical director of counseling and mental health at the Texas Christian University in Dallas, or is it in Fort Worth?
It's in Fort Worth.
Okay, all right. I know that I need to be specific about that. So from Fort Worth, Texas, and he's with us live. Welcome, Eric.
Hey, welcome. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's nice to be back, and I can hear you.
Yes, which is so great. So thank you. So first of all, tell us a little bit about what you do and what your role is on campus.
Yes, as a clinical director, I'm a primary role as a psychologist. So we have a student counseling center on campus that as part of their tuition, students can come to us and speak with a therapist. So that's my primary. We have a full staff here. We have 7 full-time therapists. We have 2 evening therapists. We have a psychiatrist. We even have therapists for alcohol and drug education. So I get the joy of actually being the clinical director of a wonderful staff. And we're busy. I mean, college students do see a lot of issues, have a lot of challenges. So it's not easy as people think it is. Every day is different, but I absolutely love my job. So I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, and now how long have you been at TCU?
This would be going on my 12th year. So I just finished 11 years. So I've been here for a while.
My God. That's amazing. So obviously, there are many different populations that struggle with eating disorders. College students are not the only ones. We're actually later on this year when we do our Eating Disorder Hope online conference, we're going to be focusing on groups that don't get as much attention usually, marginalized groups or middle-aged individuals, males who struggle. But that being said, the ages when someone is typically in college, that 18 to 24 range, is one of the most common for the onset of eating disordered behaviors. So it is an at-risk population. Do you think, your 12 years of working at TCU, do you see these problems increasing, escalating in both their frequency and seriousness? What has your tenure been like in addressing and seeing these issues? Is it getting better or is it getting worse?
Well, it's kind of hard to say. I would definitely say that we're seeing more students coming in talking about this issue. But on the flip side, in the last few years, the university as a whole, we've gotten better at actually acknowledging this issue and promoting students to actually come in and get help. So the fact that we have more students could actually be a byproduct of our outreach of actually encouraging students to come in. So that's kind of hard to say, but we are glad they're coming to get help. I will say the one thing that have gotten worse is maybe the messages that are out in the society, like eating disorder behavior has become normalized, I think, in a lot of different ways. If people want to get in shape, they tend to restrict their food and eat and work out a lot, which is actually the worst thing you can do. Or they have cheat days and it's actually binging and things like that. So I think those messages have been more intense. And I definitely obviously think those have a bad effect. So we're seeing it from both ways. We're seeing good outreach plus a negative society message that's more intense. And all that's probably contributing to us seeing more students.
Do you think also, can you talk a little bit about the atmosphere on a college campus, which is the pressure is so, so intense. Is that one of the factors that makes college students more vulnerable to this issue? I mean, I know I remember when I was at school, when I was at Emory in Atlanta. I mean, it's a great school. So the rigors, as is TCU, it's a very prominent school and noted for its academic rigor. But it's like, yeah, so you have this great opportunity. You're at a great school. You have everything you could ever want, and yet the pressure seems more intense than ever.
Yeah, I mean, there is a certain part to that. I mean, just even developmentally where they're at in life. Like if a student goes to a campus out of state and doesn't know any friends, then everything in their life can change. And as a psychologist, that's how we define stress. Not so much good or bad, but change. And if they're coming on a first year student and their friends are changing, their daily routine is changing, their relationship with their parents, identity, what they eat, how they eat, there could be that sense of lack of control. And then on top of that, you have the environmental stressors of academic stress, finding new friends, trying to fit in, gain acceptance, and all that. So it does create a lot of potential for internal struggles. And a lot of times that is an underlying issue with eating disorder is how do you cope with the underlying emotions? So it is kind of, for lack of a better word, almost like a perfect storm of things that could go wrong. There are a lot of buffers in colleges, so it's not like all bad, but there are challenges and pressures that actually could contribute to this as well.
Yeah. What do you say to critics who say, "Oh gosh, my children," or "I don't need to go to a school that offers, massages and mental health
Mhm.
counseling." And, they paint it as these extraordinary luxuries that college students get on campuses these days. What role and responsibility, and how have maybe you even experienced your role as not only being a counselor, but also like a mentor and a role model, and maybe like an older brother or a family member that they don't have on campus? How essential is your role?
I would obviously say pretty essential, but I think anyone that has that critique minimizes kind of the pressure. I mean, college students as a whole, like you said, they're high at risk, with eating disorders, even things like suicide. They're the second leading demographic of suicide attempts. A lot of emerging things like bipolar depression, things like that come out during the college age years. So to kind of say to brush it off is minimizing the severity of it. Even with eating disorders, out of all the mental health disorders, that's the one that has the highest mortality rate. So to brush that off would be minimizing just how serious it is. And then when we respond to those issues, it is a holistic approach. I mean, counseling is just one part of it, but there are other things about self-care. There are other things about how do you take care of anxiety. There are other things about other, resources on campus, whether it be the wellness center or a dietitian or a nutritionist. So all of that is part of a team approach to address a very serious issue. So I think all that is needed. And for colleges, our belief is whatever affects you as a person can affect you as a learner. So that's why every major college has a college counseling center. It's not the stereo or perception that all students are crazy or things like that, but is, yeah, we are responsible for students. They live on our campus, they have a trusted institution, and they're learners. We're an institution of higher learner. And so part of that is things that affect them personally and want to address that as well. So that's why we're here. That's why we do what we do.
Yeah. Can you also just dispel the myth that eating disorders are a phase? I mean, I think especially people are skeptical because they think, well, okay, well, then especially college, right? And this
Mhm.
applies too to binge drinking and other things that people can get into at college that maybe some folks think, well, that was just a phase. That's just a phase or something you go through in college and then you grow out of it. But that's not the reality.
No, not at all. Like I said, I think people who hold that myth, they're minimizing just how serious this can be and how mortality rate is high. But even just the medical complications, outside of that, so you definitely don't want to minimize that. But in terms of it just being a phase, you also don't want to focus just on the behavior. A lot of times in counseling, we deal with more of the emotional underlying behavior more so than just food. So to say it's just a simple behavior is also kind of limiting the viewpoint too, because a lot of people who do struggle, is the internal struggle, not just outside, is way more intense, the internal.
Yeah.
The behavior might be they restrict or binge or whatever, but internally there's so much of either anxiety or insecurity or lack of control that could just spiral into something, very, very dangerous. So you definitely don't want to minimize. If you care for somebody and you recognize the distress, easy to see how important this issue is.
Yeah. There's two things that I would really, really love to hear from you about. One is about athletes, but the second I'm going to touch on first because I think it's more broad. How can you encourage if a college student or a parent is listening to this and they want to be able to encourage their, college student son or daughter? It seems to me like, and thankfully when I went back to school, I was older than the average college student. So I had a really different experience and I had a very clear mindset of self-care and taking a break from school and all of that. But it seems like we talked about the pressure, like an environment that's so incompatible with the messages of recovery, which include balance, moderation, and taking care of yourself, taking a break, not placing all of your identity in a number, whether it's your weight on the scale or your GPA. Whereas even colleges, universities themselves place so much pressure on performance. And often you'd hear, in dorms or in classes, this competition to have the least amount of sleep, have crammed the most for the test, and have put yourself through the most amount of suffering. And like it's a competition to see who can suffer the most. That is not conducive at all with the messages of recovery. So how do you encourage your, I hesitate to say clients, but your students to combat that message that they're faced with literally every single day that's so anti-recovery?
I mean, one, I think is just to acknowledge the message. I mean, the messages that are out there can be very dangerous and they're not realistic. Like to put the focus or primary importance on physical appearance and minimize the other qualities like intelligence and social skills. I mean, those are just as vital to success as anything else. But I also think too, there are also a lot of protective factors on colleges that people don't, tap into. I mean, there is that kind of stress and the pressure, but there's also a lot of support, and people tend not to want to use that support too. I mean, we have a lot of students that not only want to be perfection, like you said, but effortless perfection. Like, oh, I do this all by myself without any support. It's not even hard for me. But you do have, if you have academic pressure, a lot of faculty are amazing. The faculty here at TCU are amazing, but it does take the student acknowledging that they're struggling and asking for the help. The College Counseling Center, a lot of students pass us every single day, like literally walk by us every single day. They'll never have that opportunity the rest of their life, but they still find it struggle to come into the counseling center because they feel like it's a failure or they're not doing on their own. Even socially, a lot of institutions have outlets to actually help students find other social relationships. But again, you have to acknowledge that that's a need of yours, that meeting new friends has been a struggle. So part of that is acknowledging, yeah, there's different messages that are wrong, but it's also okay to struggle. And if you are struggling, it's also absolutely okay to use your support. And we are a community. And so reaching out for help and reaching out for support doesn't mean anything bad, doesn't mean anything you're weak or anything that you're just tapping to the resources that are available. So that would be my response to that.
Yeah, that's so good. And what would you say to a parent? Like, how would you encourage a parent to encourage, like, what's the best way to navigate that relationship while the parent is trying to let their kid go and experience life, but at the same time, make sure that they feel like they can reach out to someone for help? Or maybe is there even a point where a parent has to be like, hey, go to the counseling center. Don't let the kid anymore.
I mean, the first thing with parents I always say is stay in your role as a parent. I mean, when we do all the research and surveys with students, not just here, but nationally, parents are always still rated pretty high up as sources of information. So it's not like the students just forget about the parents or don't have a relationship with them. Yeah, part of it is the student or the parent being aware themselves of what the relationships like. Do the parents know that there's a counseling center on campus? Do the parents know that the tuition is covering for it and things like that? But I always say, I think the mistake that I think a lot of parents might make is that if there's already a history, like in high school or things like that, sometimes families want to view college as a fresh start. Like, okay, well, let's just not acknowledge what happened in the past. Let's start all new. And they tend, like, they'll come here and they won't tell us. Like, if we have health forms, that they come in and they can like report the health problems. They're afraid to do that for us. Sometimes they get confused between us and a high school counselor, and it's totally different. And they try to minimize or be even secretive about their struggles. And we try to tell parents, I mean, especially if your students living on campus, it's better,
Yeah.
it's best to be open. I mean, there's probably nothing that we haven't seen before. Like, even if it's a severe struggle, we've probably seen it before and we probably have resources in place. But when families have that mindset, oh, this isn't high school, doesn't apply to me now, that's actually probably one of the most challenging situations because we find out about it later. When there's some incident later, that's when we find out about it. But had we known before, it would have been a whole lot easier.
Yeah. Have you ever had a student or students where you came to the point where they had to leave campus
Mhm.
to go to a higher level of care? Can you talk about that a little bit? Obviously, not mentioning names
Yeah.
or any details because obviously HIPAA compliant and confidential. Can you and talk about that and also the process? Did they come back? What is the
Hmm.
future like after that? Because I think one thing that I hear from college students a lot when I've spoken on campuses before, or not even on a campus, but from someone in a college setting, they're so afraid to go to a higher level of care or even make that first
Hmm.
step to go to the counseling center because they think, oh, I might have to leave and then my future is gone.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, two things about it. Even though we're like a short-term campus, we do have a lot of support on campus and around the community. And so the overwhelming majority of students who come to us, we're able to keep on campus in class and things like that. So it's a myth to think that most people have to like take a high level of care or take a semester off. That's just, that's a myth. Most students were able to, meet their needs here. But what I always tell students is, especially one thing I love about my job is when you're in that 18 and 24-year-old, that's really a prime time for intervention. And if you can really address whatever's going on right now, you can really make the trajectory of the rest of your life a whole lot better. And so,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there are situations where students, especially with eating disorders, because there is that, association with perfectionism. And so a lot of times they're doing really good in school, but they're struggling with their health. And they want to stay in school because they're doing really good in school, but the struggle with the health is obviously more important. But the one thing I would word it as, if we can address it now, and especially with the university, I mean, if it's a medical leave, withdrawal, they can come back. There's no penalty with that. They have a scholarship. They still keep their scholarship and things like that. So there's no penalty with it. But it's a whole lot easier to do it now, and it's a whole lot smoother transition to do it now than to wait 15, 20 years, from now and try to do it then. So in terms of the trajectory of their life, it's better to intervene now and during this time. So that's one of the reasons we try
Oh,
to,
that's so, yes.
you know, so that's,
Yeah,
and then also
yeah.
the support system that we have when they come back, there's a lot of support there too.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's like, I just want to say, like, take advantage of it. Your tuition is covering it. Oh my God. Later in life, it's so much harder.
It is.
I hadn't prepared to ask you this question, but I am curious to hear what you think about this. So, in the broader world, outside of the eating disorder and mental health world, there's a lot of conversation about safe spaces on college campuses. A lot of people advocating for them, as well as a lot of critics saying, no, this is making our kids too sensitive. And once they go out into the real world, they're not going to be able to cope.
Mm-hmm.
And this general criticism that young people are getting too soft,
Mm-hmm.
especially when it comes to being on university campuses. I have really mixed feelings about this because I understand how vulnerable young people are. And so do you hear that conversation? I mean, especially in Texas, it's a very like, we're a tough kind of state. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel like there's a lot of pushback against this. Where did that conversation come from? Is that happening on your campus? And how do you balance that fine line between preparing young people for the real world, which is going to be harsh, but
Mm-hmm.
also giving them that valuable support that they need, like you mentioned, at this vulnerable time?
I mean, I think part of it is a generational effect. Sometimes when we talk about preparing them for the world, we have to realize the world's going to be different. And sometimes the mindset of, oh, the young people are soft, but the definition of soft is based on the older generations, when the world was different. I mean, there are a lot of strengths with the younger generation. I mean, their intelligence rates has been higher. They're connected to the world, obviously. They better at technology. They're more creative and things like that. Even resilience factors, which used to be a stereotype that they're not resilient. Now there's literature saying they are resilient. So there are strengths that you definitely want to, captivate and activate and encourage them. But you also want to acknowledge is that the world that they're going to grow up with and take over is different than the world 20, 30 years ago. And so I wouldn't necessarily agree that they're less vulnerable or, too soft or anything like that. I think the world is just changing, and what used to work 50 years ago is not really going to apply to now. And so I think if you look at turn the generational level, I mean, these are phones, they've always been connected by technology. They've always had friends across the world that they can communicate with, whether it be for video games or, online chats or things like that. So they have more of an open mind and they have more exposure to things. And so I think if you really captivate on things like that and realize it's not the traditional mindset, you'll appreciate the younger generation a lot more.
Amen. Thank you. I love that. That was so much better than I could have ever tried to say it. But you're so right about that, and I really appreciate you for pointing that out. So moving back to that question I wanted to ask you before about athletes, because
Okay.
I was the dancer, and I know that people in sports where they're very committed to their sport and it's their life, whether it's wrestling or running or track and field or figure skating or dance or whatever it is, especially those ones where body image is very much an important part of that sport, that there's this real fear that, am I going to lose my scholarship? Am I not going to be able to perform as well? Do I have to give up my sport in order to recover from this? Especially with men, I can't even imagine that battle. Obviously, I'm not a dude, so I can't imagine it. But how do you deal with those students? What do you tell them? And can they stay in their sport and be healthy?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on where they're at in terms of the health risks. I mean, the way we try to, or I guess one of the things I've kind of learned that helps is that they really captivate to the ideal of performance. Performance is something they're very keen on. And really the ideal is, you're not going to be at your peak performance if your body's, struggling, if you have health problems. There's just no way. And so we always have the mindset, yeah, health is over than sport, like always. And there's been situations where you just have to make that decision that their health, like if they're on the point where they need hospitalization, but they want to go out on like a 10-mile run, there's always like, health is always more important. But when we really sit down with them, when we ask, yeah, you're right. Some of the athletes have been playing since they're 4 or 3 years old. This is all they know. They have dreams of like going on. But in their performances, like to be at the peak performance, your body has to be healthy. Your body has to be strong. And yeah, there's certain ways you can do that because a lot of times what we see with our athletes is that they go beyond, what the device is. Like, I mean, a lot of departments will have like a sport nutritionist or dietitian, and they take that advice, but then go beyond it. Like they work out more, they eat less. And so they're not even following the advice that they get. And so really say, no, it's like what you're doing is actually harming your performance because your body is not as strong as it can be. And so you need to follow the nutritional guidelines that you get, but also not push yourself. And so that's kind of in a way that I find that a lot of athletes will respond when we talk about performance. But yeah, when it comes down to it, health is always going to be number one. And I think any parent would rather have their student be alive than playing a sport.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I remember, and too, I relate to that mindset so well because I remember thinking, well, no, I got to this place of excellence by going beyond the guidelines. What the guidelines for everyone else are, I can do better. I can push more. I can push harder. And so it's really hard to step back from that, to be an extra challenge and say, if I want to, and this is the weird mind trick that you have to do, like if I want to be excellent, then I have to moderate and balance. And that is, the perfectionist mind does not want to let you go there.
No, and that's the struggle. But yes, you have to take care of yourself, and you just articulated very well the struggles of what they have. But yes, they can actually do better and be stronger if they actually pull back a little bit.
Yep. Yes, it works. And I know because I've done it, it works. So let's talk a little bit about something that is being talked about more on college campuses. And you mentioned it in your notes of things that are trending, so to speak, college campuses. And that's this term drunkorexia. And really is like this horrible toxic combo of binge drinking and severe food and calorie restriction and possibly overexercising, or a combination of them all. This sounds like, honestly, cardiac arrest and death waiting to happen.
Yes.
Maybe I'm being over dramatic, but I'm not the clinician, so I don't I have to worry about it. But what is this? Is this more common, and how dangerous is it?
Yeah, it's one of those things like we were talking about disorder eating habits being more normalized, and we're seeing a lot more students talk about it. And obviously, there's different ranges of severity, but it's the ideal of if a student is going to go out that night and they're really worried about the calories, they'll restrict their calories during the day because the mindset is I'm going to drink my calories at night. Um, and so some people might do this like, a couple of days a week, but some students also use it as a justification, as well. This is a justification to restrict my food in general because I'm in a college environment, I like to go party. So it actually means a lot more. It's more like an anorexia type of thing. But yeah, you mentioned, health problems. It can be very serious. If you are not eating food and then you're using alcohol at night for your calories, there is nothing nutritious that your body can pull from that. So you're pretty much running on empty. And so, I mean, if you think about that mindset, what are you doing to your internal organs that need food, and they're not getting it? And so it can be definitely very dangerous. But I think the scary part for us is just the mentality that it has, or the misinformation that could easily spread of don't eat food at night because I want to have calories at night. I mean, that's just being preoccupied with it, which the anxiety with that would be, pretty intense.
Yeah. What are you seeing? Are you seeing drinking behavior and binge drinking behavior on college campuses increase? It seems to me it is.
I think that's it kind of goes back to what we were saying about colleges doing more outreaches about it. Because I think in before is maybe traditionally just kind of accepted. And one, if you actually do some research, you'll find that there's a lot of students, especially in the younger generation, more and more of them who don't drink, like who just don't drink. Yeah, like
That is
you,
cool news. Thank you,
yeah,
Eric. You
yeah,
just
you.
made my night.
Yeah, we're seeing that trend, and we actually saw that even on this campus. That a lot of students who come in and just say, "I don't want to drink." Now, a lot of them do, but it's probably more than you would expect. And so
Yeah.
that's actually kind of the issue. Is a lot of people have this perception that other students drink a lot, and if you ask a college student, especially with alcohol and drugs,
So
they'll
then they'll
guess that
feel
other
the
students.
pressure
Yeah,
of it as well.
exactly. And
Yeah.
so the perception that everyone's doing it when everyone is not doing as much as they think, and there's a lot of students who don't do it at all, I mean, that just kind of creates a dangerous meshes out there if you're not aware of it.
Yeah, really, really good. Okay, so if you're listening to this and you're a college student, not everyone is getting stupid drunk Friday and Saturday and possibly Sunday night. So you don't have to eat it. um,
Exactly.
I love that. Okay, so let's say someone is in recovery on campus, whether they're at your counseling center or they have a treatment team back home and they're on campus. What are some tools, some pieces of advice that you can give them for staying strong in their recovery while at college?
Yeah, I mean, first thing I would just say, just acknowledge your story. Like if you've been in recovery, you're on that side of it, that's just a beautiful thing. And so you don't ever need to be ashamed or minimize it. Or again, you don't want to have this mentality that college is a fresh start, that I don't want to acknowledge it. You come a long way just to get to that point. And so some of the things, yeah, you definitely want to do is have like a support system in place. Even if you have a treatment team back home, just know where the counseling center is at, because a lot of times students can walk in and see if there's a student in an emergency, know how that process works, and what resources are on campus, because the more support that you have, the better. And the more that you check in with the treatment team, the better. And I would say I think the thing is follow the advice. So many times people might get treatment fatigue, like, oh, I've been doing this for so long and now I went to college and everyone's having fun. I don't want to acknowledge my treatment, or what my therapist is saying. I just want to be separate from that. Well, and that again could backfire because that advice and that treatment can help another episode from ever coming. And that's what you want. You want to be kind of free from that. So following the advice is a process. I always tell people that recovery, whether it be from eating disorders or anything else, it's a lifestyle. It's not an event. It's not like a one moment. It's a way of living. And there are a lot of benefits to way of living. And there's a lot of things you gain from going through the process of recovery. So it's not something you should be ashamed about, but you definitely want to make it part of your story and not try to separate yourself or forget about it.
Yeah, so good. What can you give a word of advice or encouragement to men, to young men who might be struggling on campus? Because I think there's this idea that eating disorders are a girl's disease, and then too, if they go to the counseling center, whether it's for an eating disorder or anxiety or depression or anything like that, it's gonna be full of women, and they're gonna get a women therapist. And look, there you are, and you're not a woman, So just yeah, a word for the guys would be great.
Yeah, I mean, I would just really, first of all, say it's more common than what probably students realize, especially with male. Whether it be just, trying to like bulk up and have a certain physical appearance or use supplements. We've seen a lot of binge eating disorder in males, usually because they've been so restricted and have a cheat day, so it becomes a binge. What we tell people is don't think of it as a gender, like, is it a male, female, whatever. It's not that. What's really important is that you kind of emotionally feel at peace. The thing is, with when it becomes body image, it doesn't really matter if you think like you're attractive or not attractive. It's how much anxiety that you have. I've seen a lot of males that come in and they work out way too much, they're super fit and everything, but that's all they think about. And if they
Yeah.
have one bad meal, they're so scared of the body changing. They're always comparing themselves to other people. So even though they look really good, they compare themselves to someone else who's just a little bit bigger. And there's so much distress and they're preoccupied and they're in prison because they think about it so much. That is actually a negative body image. Even though they say they look good, it's so much anxiety and so much preoccupation about it. And that's what we want them to be free from. And so we tell students all the time, if that's your mindset, then in that mental, you're kind of in a prison because there's other things in life to focus on, relationships, goals, future, things like that. And we want you to get to the point where you're free from that kind of mentality. So the encouragement be is don't let any stereotype or anything like that kind of stop you from getting help. We see a lot more than what people would think, but our whole goal is to get rid of the emotional part. I've seen students who come in there and we talk more about how do you reduce the rumination, how do you reduce the preoccupation, anxiety. We talk about those issues way more than we talk about physical appearance.
Right. Absolutely. And last thing, if someone feels like they might be slipping, if they feel like a relapse is coming on, what do they do in a crisis?
Yeah, I would first of all get help because I think it is a sign of strength. I mean, so many people think it's a failure if I'm slipping, but if you got to the point where you're able to recognize that your symptoms are reemerging or that you're struggling and then respond, that is a sign of progress. Like you didn't go back to step one. Like, you actually took a step further because you're able to recognize kind of a struggle. And especially if you do it before anyone else, and you recognize it on your own and no one pointed it out. So, to encouragement, I would say that's actually a very good sign of progress that you were able to do that. There's no shame in that. It actually means you've come a really long way for you to be able to do that. And hopefully you got to the point where you know where to reach out to. And if you do, whether it be a treatment team or a family member or a counseling center, then give yourself permission to go ahead and reach out and let people know. The thing about eating disorder is so secretive a lot of times, and that dynamic is what fosters kind of the intensity. So if you break that secrecy by definition, you already done a lot of work just by doing that. So telling somebody that you're starting to struggle, even if you just walk into the counseling center and tell a therapist that, you still break that secrecy and it's not just internal, and that will kind of open the door for progress down the road.
Yeah. And one last thing, we had this question, and I think it was a really, really good one. And that is, what do you do with if you face a mental health professional, whether it's on campus or outside, who minimizes your struggle or says, oh, it's just a phase you're going through,
Mm-hmm.
or why don't you just eat or something like that? I mean, this is someone who's supposed to be a professional,
Yeah.
and someone hears that. What do they do in that situation?
I mean, just like any profession, is going to be, people who are, very well equipped and people who aren't so much. and there's going to be people who don't have experience with it. Um, I'm fortunate that, that comment that we were talking about, I can't imagine anyone on my staff even making that comment. And most of my colleagues would be shocked at that comment of a therapist telling someone that this just stop it, or just a, teenage phase, because again, it does minimize the severity of it. And so first of all, I mean, if you're in that moment, you could disagree. You have the right to disagree with your therapist,
Yes. Yes.
and and you could say like, this is distressing. But if you also don't feel comfortable with the therapist, you also have the right to switch therapists. Just because you walk into a counseling center and meet with one person, you're not locked into that person. And if that person doesn't have the experience it or minimizes it, then you're probably better off maybe looking for another therapist and things like that, because that could be a potentially dangerous message. And most therapists would not read that statement and agree with it. They would totally disagree with it and be shocked by that comment. So yeah, part of it is finding a
Yeah.
therapist that's really okay. And when students come in us, they ask, like, do you have any experience with this issue? I think that's great. I think that's
That's
wonderful when
awesome.
you ask those questions like that. And you have the right to do that. So I actually encourage students to do more of that.
Very, very cool. Awesome. Well, we got in a lot of really, really great stuff, and I'm so, so thankful that you were able to join us and give us some really, really great feedback and wonderful insight. Eric, this has been a joy. Thank you so, so much. Elsa, come here. We're dying of heat. I'm doing this live from Germany, and we've got a heat wave over here. I know it's super hot in Fort Worth, and Elsa is just like, bleh. She is done with me. But we gotta say goodbye to everyone who's watching. Oh, all right, Eric, Elsa, and I say thank you very much.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, it was really, really wonderful to have you. And I'm just going to come on the screen here and say thank you to everyone so much for watching and tuning in, and so much good information. This video, if you're not watching with us live, if you're watching later, is going to live on the top of our Facebook page for the rest of the week. So, and I come back and check the comments. So please, let us know what's on your mind, and I'll come back and answer, direct a question to Eric if you have it. It will also be on our YouTube channel as well, so you can share from there too. But this is meant to be a resource for you, so please share it, especially if you have a family member or a friend, or you yourself are in college and want to share it with your friends. Super, super great information. So just some really cool takeaways that I want to reiterate that Eric talked about. One, like, your struggle is valid. If you're struggling with something, it's real, it matters, and it doesn't make you weak to seek help. It absolutely does not. In fact, it makes you stronger, and it makes you stronger than a lot of maybe other classmates who are pushing down their struggles. So do not be afraid to get help. Another one, like Eric just said, if you go to a counselor or you go to someone and you're not getting the support you need, go to someone else. You have that right. I worked through a couple different therapists before I found a clinician who really, really connected with me. So don't be afraid to find the person who's best for you. And then the last thing is that just embrace this time that you have at university. It's not always the best 4 years of your life, like some people say, but it definitely is an incredibly important time. So soak it up. And the only way that you can really do that, take advantage of all the once in a lifetime opportunities that you have at university, is to do it when you're healthy, is to have a healthy mind, a healthy body, and a healthy spirit. And you can recover and be free from anxiety and be able to regulate your emotions in a healthy way, and to be able to embrace all that the college experience has to offer. But you have to do it. The only way that you can do it is if you're healthy. And thankfully, so many colleges are just like Texas Christian University, have incredible support on campus. So don't be afraid to reach out. All right. Well, thank you so much for watching this week's episode of Weekly Hope. We'll actually be back tomorrow as well for another episode at 1 p.m. Eastern. Yes, it is 1 p.m. Eastern time as well. So same time back here tomorrow. Please join us. We'll see you back, and wherever you are in the world, hope you have a beautiful, blessed day and rest of your week, and we'll see you next time on Weekly Hope.